I think I've spent certainly the first 20, 21 years of my life really figuring out what it was I wanted to do. I felt, certainly at school, a little bit of a lost soul. I was not perhaps the most social of individuals. And I think the school environment I was in, you have a lot of people from very sort of disrupted backgrounds who've lost their parents at an early age. And I think you have a lot of kids in one location at one time who really don't have a great deal of experience on how to relate to one another. So even though I was at a school where there was 200, 250 pupils and we sort of lived together and worked together 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, I don't think people really, connected. So even though you're in that kind of a crowded environment, it felt, I think, even now looking back on it, relatively lonely. And then I got into my teens and still felt that I didn't really know. I mean, I studied the trumpet and I played with the Royal Malvern Orchestra. I went to college here in Birmingham and did a diploma in graphic art and design and photography. And I played the guitar and I kind of like messed around with a lot of things. I think really struggling to try and find out what it was I wanted to do. And it wasn't until 1987, the latter part of 1987, when I was down in Sussex. I mean, you read, I was reading a book about FBI criminal profiling of serial killers, and they were talking about something called situational dynamics, which is like the circumstances surrounding an event that precipitate the event. And they talked about background and education and cultural and social influences and this kind of thing. And I think what occurred at the latter part of 1987 were situational dynamics. I was down in Sussex, attending a series of conferences about drug rehabilitation, which I had been involved in for a while. And these conferences went on daily, and they would take a break every hour, hour and a half, and we'd come out and have coffee and smoke cigarettes. And there was one guy there from London who I didn't know, a stranger, and he kept on coming out, standing in the corridor, reading a book. And after seeing him do this about 4 or 5 times, I went to him and I said, "What's the deal with the book?" And he said, "I just can't stop reading it. I'm absolutely transfixed." And it was It by Stephen King. And it was the effect that this thing created on him and the way he reacted to this book. And I thought, that's it. That's what I want to do. The best advice I think I was ever given as a writer was write about what you're interested in. And the whole span of middle 20th century American culture and history fascinated me. That was my cultural influence as a child. And the kind of subject that I wanted to write about, the kind of canvas that I wanted, America was big enough. The significance of American culture and politics and history for certainly the second half of the 20th century, from 1950 to 2000, has influenced world situations and world politics and world culture, perhaps more than anything. The reason that we have the music that we have is because of American black blues musicians. The reason that we have the political structure in place in America that influences the world is because of the first 50 years of the 20th century in the States. Writing in that style, writing in the style that I write, never seemed to be something that I had to try to do. It just seemed to feel right. Perhaps one of the most common questions I'm asked when I go to libraries, when I meet people, is whether or not the degree of sort of upset and trauma that occurred in my early life influences and informs the way I write. I mean, I don't think necessarily that it can do anything but. My grandmother's step-aunt, who rescued me from a foster home when I was 18 months old, she sent her nephew to find me because I'd been adopted or fostered by a foster family. And he broke into a house and found me in a back bedroom, and I'd been there apparently for a week and was malnourished and sort of in a mess. I'd been there for a week, left alone, and he stole me from the house and took me to my grandmother's stepsisters and hid me there. They hid me there for 6 weeks and got me well, and then persuaded my grandmother to let my mother take me back because my grandmother really, really didn't want my mother to have children. And she convinced my mother to have us fostered. because in 1965 it was just not the done thing. You didn't have children out of wedlock. Well, I mean, the different excitements I got involved in as a teenager, like ending up in prison for 3 months and being an instrumental part of the Handsworth riots in 1982 and running away from the police. I think perhaps there is an element to take into consideration that there's perhaps some people, not necessarily that attract trouble, but attract drama. I think probably, I don't know whether it's some sort of compensatory device or I have a very low boredom threshold, but I tend to get myself into situations and have things happen that certainly keep me interested in life. And Hemingway said a really, really interesting thing. He says you can lose something in life. You can lose something important in life. If it's a bad thing that you've lost, the hole will fill up naturally. The hole that it leaves behind will fill up naturally. If it's a good thing that you've lost, then you have to work to fill up the hole with other good things. It won't fill up by itself, which I think was quite an astute observation. So I kind of am fortunate in that most of the things that have happened to me have been pretty bad and they've filled up naturally as a result of circumstance and occurrence.